So, you're an African man 5,000 years ago. You dress like this, sometimes like this. You work in the blazing African sun like this, and make your food like this. Your hair looks like this, at times like this, and at other times like this. Your wife prefers hers like this, but plaits the children's hair like this, who she gave birth to looking like this. And when you have any trouble with other people's rotten neighborhood harassing kids, you go to your police, who look like this. Unless there's a war and then there's no home force because they're all away fighting, looking like this. But wait, what's this? On the 2nd of July 2025, an important peer-reviewed study was released by faculty members of the UK's Liverpool John Moores University. It promised big things, but before anyone could really digest what the study was actually saying, the usual suspects were out in force, framing it for their own ends, missing out crucial bits of information and giving their audiences a warped understanding of the paper's claims. Fortunately, the rest of the world can read. So, what are you waiting for? Hit like and subscribe, and let's dive in. Quote, "We sequenced a whole genome from an adult male Egyptian excavated at Nuwayrat, radiocarbon dated between 2855 to 2570 BC, bridging the early dynastic and Old Kingdom periods. The body was interred in a ceramic pot within a rock-cut tomb, potentially contributing to the DNA preservation. Most of his genome is best represented by North African Neolithic ancestry, yet approximately 20% of his genetic ancestry can be traced to genomes representing the Eastern Fertile Crescent, including Mesopotamia and surrounding regions." Close quote. 2855 BC is 4,880 years ago. That's a few centuries after a military genius from Egypt's Nubian frontier would rise up to conquer the northern regions of the country as far as the delta, where the Nile pours into the Mediterranean. By so doing, this African generalissimo united the two regions of Upper and Lower Egypt. Upper in Egypt terms is south of the Nile, and lower is north of the Nile, so categorized because the Nile is the only river in the world that flows down from the south in a northwards direction. But back to this man. This is the military leader who united the two regions of what is today known as Egypt, but was known to him as Kemet, in English, the Black Land. This first of pharaohs was a man named Narmer, and you're looking at one of only two iconographic representations of him to have survived till today. This is the other, in which he wields a type of mace still being used by Africans as far south as Zululand, and as recently as the late 1800s by Zulu warriors fighting the British. Now on your screen are the kings that succeed Narmer and give Egypt everything that would make it Egypt: the pyramids, the friezes, the temples, world-renowned military might, and of course, the Sphinx. During their reign, many things that we today cannot imagine ancient Egypt without were created and solidified as part of the ancient Egyptian identity. For example, motifs such as the image of the child with its finger to the mouth, this statue being one of the earliest representations of it. Hieroglyphs, a written codification of the ancient Egyptian language, which first developed as part of the Afro-Asiatic language group, a language family which experts almost unanimously agree came from here, roughly modern-day Sudan, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Gods based on cattle worship and mummification practices. It is during this time period that authors of the Liverpool John Moores paper of 2025 believed the Nuwayrat man lived. But a strange thing happens as you read this 2025 paper. The authors seem less bothered about the man's connection to his country and continent of origin, and his links to the people who populated this landmass during his time period. Instead, they spend more of their time discussing the man's tenuous links to Western Asia 5,000 years ago. They do this based on the Nuwayrat man's genetic results, returning a 20% haplogroup affinity from the ancient Mesopotamia region. You don't have to be a neurosurgeon to work out that 20 out of 100 leaves a whopping 80, as in 80%. Some white Europeans, typically Mediterraneans, have more than 20% ancestry traceable to Africa. No big deal, unless an anthropologist 5,000 years from now has an agenda more preoccupied with that African origin than their European affinities. But let's look more closely at what the paper actually says. Quote, "The Nuwairat individual is genetically most similar to present-day people in North Africa and West Asia. The mitochondrial DNA haplogroup N1A1B2 and chromosome Y haplogroup E1B1B1B2B, haplogroups of the Nuwairat individual, are most common in present-day North African and West Asian groups consistent with the whole genome affinities." Close quote. An unsuspecting individual might read that and conclude an equal contribution of these two influences to the story of early Egypt, which is what many hobbyist content creators have done. Sadly, it's also what professional and supposedly scientific channels like The New Scientist have done. Not entirely their fault, seeing as the paper's authors themselves seem to be reducing the results of their own study to this simplistic inference. But let's go deeper. North Africa is a modern socio-political designation which includes regions as far south as the Sudan, a country on the same latitude as Chad, Niger, and northern Nigeria. As such, North Africa is a monumentally huge landmass, dwarfing Western and Central Europe combined, and consisting today of various types of people who look, act, and worship very differently. So then, can our 2025 paper be more specific? Yes, and it is. Nuwairat man's North African genome is 80% E1B1B1B2B. The paper states that this Y haplogroup is most common in present-day North Africa. But here again, the alarm bells really start to ring. Why? Because the paper seems to be giving half the story. Here's how. E1B1B1B2B is a subclade of E1B1B, demonstrated by this genetic atlas chart at its most concentrated levels in, quote, sub-Saharan Africa, places like Ethiopia, Somalia, and yes, the Sudan. One has to wonder then, when the 2025 paper claims E1B1B1B2B is North African, which part of North Africa specifically? If the Sudan or Horn of Africa regions, where the parent clade of E1B1B is thought to have originated from anyway, then the study should make that clear, surely. To simply claim North Africa excludes from the minds of many populations and types of modern Africans many would not typically consider as North African. But the rabbit hole goes deeper, especially when you discover that E1B1B1B2B in phylogenetic studies of ancient samples have presented most commonly here in more southern regions of Africa, places like Ethiopia, Somalia, and yes, Kenya, regions which can be included in northeastern Africa, but not the more politicized entity of North Africa. This isn't just a trust me bro moment. Here, this is a diagram of the specific distribution of haplogroup distribution in ancient samples. Image D of the figure shows E1B1B1B2B, Nuwairat man's haplotype, peaking in phylogenetic samples of ancient East Africans, such as Kenyans. Ironically, this paper was published by a Dr. Rui Martiniano. Dr. Martiniano is from the same Liverpool John Moores University as the lead authors of our 2025 genomic study. Once clarified, all of this changes a potential reimagining of Nuwairat man just a little, doesn't it? Perhaps those who have run with the wrong message are not to be blamed after all. Let's just say this new paper hasn't been the most transparent of academic papers, but we can go deeper than they did. Further down in the paper, this is admitted. All accepted models show the presence of ancestry related to Middle Neolithic Morocco in the Nuwairat genome. Therefore, our results could indicate shared ancestry across North Africa during this period, and consequently that local Egyptian Neolithic populations contributed genetically to the early dynastic and Old Kingdom people, as indicated from material culture and bioarchaeological analyses. Close quote. The Neolithic period in African history is typically characterized as falling between 10,000 to 2,000 years BC. The 2025 paper claims that the North African ancestry found in Nuweirat man is likely to be the same as that of Neolithic North Africans. This is a scientific reconstruction of a Homo sapien man from this region hundreds of thousands of years prior to the Neolithic age, a type whose genetic makeup Nuweirat man inherited. Such reconstructions are based on skeletal analyses such as bone density and limb proportions, craniometric ratios such as dolichocephaly, and dental analyses. But is there any more we can go on when it comes to deciphering what Neolithic North Africans looked like? Yes, and you're at the right place to find out. But first, flags at half-mast, kopeshes drawn in salute, and let the Medjay archers lift their bows as the Trill Nation hails its most eminent members, the men and women who help us produce exposés such as this. Unlike the funders of the 2025 paper, they refuse to be hidden in the footnotes. Join these incredible men and women to help us put out more of these amazing exposés. Hit the join button below to become a scholar, soldier or sage of the Trill Nation today. A special shout out goes out to our sages, Black Rampage 2, Kader Albert, and the newest member of this Council of Sages, the illustrious and honorable K. Wright Carr. Thank you, one and all. Now take a look at these series of rock paintings dating to the Neolithic period, found all across North Africa and later on Neolithic Egypt, specifically the Nakadan culture. No commentary needed, except to remind you that it is from the people depicted in these images and their period of suzerainty over North Africa from which Nuweirat man's genes is said to spring forth from. Enjoy. More than these, it has long been admitted in academic circles that the closest modern population groups to Neolithic North Africans are the Dinka and the Nuer peoples of East Africa. Nuers look like this, and Dinkas look like this. Late anthropology professor and expert Christopher Ehret had a lot to say on this topic. Quote, "Major burial sites of those founding locales of ancient Egypt in the 4th millennium BCE, notably El Badari as well as Nakada, show no demographic indebtedness to the Levant. They reveal instead a population with cranial and dental features with closest parallels to those of other long-time populations of the surrounding areas of northeastern Africa, such as Nubia and the northern Horn of Africa." Close quote. But there's still more. The oldest mummified figure on the African continent is from the Neolithic period in North Africa, specifically southern Libya. The mummy has been estimated to be 7,500 years old and is of a boy whose skeleton analyses prove him to have been a black, quote, negroid infant of approximately 2 years old as at the time of death. And still, we can dig even deeper into the picture of the world and the peoples immediately surrounding Nuweirat man. Yes, even deeper, skin deep. The authors of the paper predict Nuweirat man's skin color as follows. Quote, "The Nuweirat individual is predicted to have had brown eyes, brown hair and skin pigmentation ranging from dark to black skin, with a lower probability of intermediate skin color." Close quote. Exactly why this lower probability should matter is unclear, but this is to digress. Dark to black is what the paper claims Nuweirat man's skin looked like, certainly enough to dispel any notion that Africans either on the African continent or in the diaspora have no visceral affinities with ancient Egypt. But what of the dark in dark to black? The vagueness implied by this given range has allowed for some to paint Nuweirat man as this racially ambiguous individual with a slight olive tan. But once again, when you dig deeper into the paper, the truth seems less vague and vastly different to what the armchair experts are claiming. By dark to black skin, the 2025 paper is using a very specific classification system for genotype and phenotype classification. This system is cited in the article's post notes and is a scientific standard called High-Res Plex S system. This system is more specific than the phrasing dark to black would suggest. This 2018 paper elucidates this system. As you can see, dark skin has a specific numeric classification, whereas dark to black is a class apart with its own specific classification, the highest ratio for signifying melanin-dense skin separate from mere dark skin. This suggests that far from looking like a modern Mediterranean man, as the loan term dark might suggest in some minds, Nuweirat man more likely looked like the people his genetics specifically clustered with, Neolithic Egyptians, whose predominant skin tone can be seen all over the remnants of Egypt's monuments and artifacts, ranging from dark brown to black, all skin tones casually referred to and discriminated against today across Europe, America and modern North Africa as black. Rather than identifying this skin classification system and its implications for what Nuweirat man most likely looked like within the substantive body of their article, the heroes of our 2025 genomic paper opt for placing a reference in the footnote. In a similar way, they placed this useful article by Professor Schumacher Keita in their footnotes, far from the roving eyes of a presuming public. Professor Schumacher Keita's paper demonstrates the prevalence of the black African type among the ancient Egyptian, particularly its overwhelming domination across the country except for in its far north. But why? Why the cloak and dagger approach from the 2025 paper? Why the subterfuge, an emphasis of non-Egyptian cultures over the African? Why no exploration of Nuweirat man and his indebtedness to Africans and Africoid people, as Dr. Edet would have put it? Would it have anything to do with this, or this, or this, or even this? Is any of this why, when the authors of the 2025 paper decided to reconstruct Nuweirat man's face, they opted for this evasive black and white image? Not to worry, we'll fix that for you, Liverpool John Moores, or more specifically, a few good men and women will. Check out Nile Valley History's YouTube channel for further tips on reconstructions, or the artist Nydia Senegal for some truly realistic reconstructions of historically black people throughout the panoply of black history. Oddly enough, this isn't the first time Egyptologists and scientists have studied the genetics of the ancient Egyptians. They've also studied the pharaohs. The results? They'll shock you. Click the video on your screen right now to find out why they don't talk about these results. Until next time.